So let's have one more. A tragedy in black. A folk tale from the time of Oblivion Crisis. The Dremora looked at the young boy with disdain. He looked to be no more than 17 or 18, on the cusp of manhood. You have summoned me. Mother says I'm good with spells. Someday I'm gonna be a wizard, maybe even archmage. And what would your mother know of magic, boy? She's a wizard. She's an enchanter of the Archon University. Ah, another dabbler in the mystic arts. I'm certain she's barely mediocre. You shut up. I read the scroll. I get to tell you what to do. The Dremora was silent. Compulsion bound his voice. I want to know how to make a magic dress. I need it for her birthday. The Dremora's answer was more silence. You have to tell me. It's in the rules. Freed from the previous compulsion, the Dremora answered. First, you need a soul gem. I happen to have one. I will gladly give it to you for so noble a cause. Really? Why do I need it? With a hidden smile, the Dremora handed over the jewel black gem. It is not enough to cast a spell upon an inert object. Magic requires thought, intent, will, and emotion. The soul powers the enchantment. The bigger the soul, the more powerful the enchantment. So, how big is the one in this soul gem? Oh, that one is empty. You have to fill it. But it can hold the largest of soul easily. Do you know how to do that? No, the young man said sullenly. Let me show you. You cast a spell like this. The tendrils of the soul trap spell spilled from his fingers and summoned the boy. The young man's eyes went wide. I didn't feel anything, he complained. How about now? The Dremora asked, plunging his talons into the youth's ribcage. His heart beat only once before he was pulled from his chest. Quickly, the Dremora snatched back the black soul gem just as the youth died. His soul tried to flee, but was trapped by the spell and drawn into the gem. Only black soul gems can hold the soul of men and elves. Your mother obviously never told you never to accept a freely given gift from a summoned Dremora, he said to the corpse. You see, it breaks the conjuration, freeing the summoned from the summoner. Now, let's go find your mother. After all, I have another black soul gem. Yeah, teaching was incomplete. Summoning can have its flaws.
considered redecorating? Don't look at me like that, it was just a suggestion.
Chance Folly by Zilmok Gorge. By the time she was 16, Mainva Yolos has been an unwelcome guest in every shop and manor in Balmora. Sometimes she will take everything of value within. Other times she was enough to experience the pure pleasure of finding a way past the locks and traps. In every situation, she would leave a pair of ties in a prominent location as a calling card to let the owners know who had burgled them. The mysterious ghost became known to the locals as Chance, a typical conversation in Balmora at this time. "My dear, whatever happened to that marvelous necklace of yours?" "My dear, it was taken by Chance." The only time when Chance disliked her hobby, that was when she miscalculated and she came upon a owner or a guard. So far, she had never been told or even seen, but dozens of times she had uncomfortably close encounters. There came a day when she felt it was time to expand her reach. She considered going to Vivek or Gnesis, but one night at the 8th plate, she heard a tale of the Aaron ancestral tomb, an ancient tomb filled with traps and possessing hundreds of years of Aaron family's treasures. The idea of breaking the spell of the Aaron tomb and gaining the fortune within appealed to Chance, but facing the guardians was outside of her experience. While she was considering her options, she saw Herstier Morse by, sitting at a table nearby, by himself as usual. He was a huge brute of a Briton who had a reputation as a gentle eccentric, a great warrior who had gone mad and paid more attention to the voices in his head than to the world around him. If she must have a partner in this enterprise, Chance decided this man would be perfect. He will not demand or understand the concept of getting an equal share of the bounty. If worse came to worse, he would not be missed if the inhabitants of the Aaron tomb were too much for him, or if Chance found his company tiresome and elected to leave him behind. "Herstier, I don't think we ever met, but my name is Mindwell," she said, approaching the table. "I am fancying a trip to the Aaron ancestral tomb. If you think you could handle the monsters, I could take care of unlocking doors and popping traps. What do you think?" The Breton took a moment to reply, as if considering the counsel of the voices in his head. Finally, he nodded his head in the affirmative, mumbling, "Yes, yes, yes, proper rock, hot steel, cheating, walls beyond doors, 53, 2 months and back." "Splendid," said Chance, not the least but half by his rambling. "We'll leave early tomorrow." When Chance met Herstier the next morning, he was wearing cheating armor and had armed himself with an unusual blade that glowed faintly of enchantment. As they began their trek, she tried to engage him in conversation, but his responses were so nonsensical that she quickly abandoned the attempt. A sudden rainstorm swelled over the plain, dousing them, but as she was wearing no armor and Herstier was wearing sleek sheeting, their progress was not impeded. Into the dark recesses of the Aaron tomb they did. Her instincts had been correct. They made very good partners. She recognized the ancient snap wire traps, their falls, and brittle backs before they were triggered, and cracked all manners of lock. Simple tumbler, combination, twisted tops, double catch, varieties from antiquity with no modern names, rusty hips that would have been dangerous to open even if one possessed the actual key. Esther, for his part, slew scores of bizarre fiends, the likes of which Chance, a city girl, had never seen before. His enchanted blade spell of fire was particularly effective against the frost actions. He even saved her when she lost her footing and nearly plummeted into a shadowy crack in the floor. Not to hurt herself, he said, his face showing genuine concern. There are walls beyond doors, and 53 drain ring, 2 months and back. Prop a rock. Come, Mother Chance. Chance had not been listening to much of Erstier babbling, but when he said Chance, she was startled. She had introduced herself to him as Minva. Could it be that the peasants were right, and that when madmen spoke, they were talking to the Daedra Prince Shegorat, who gave them advice and information beyond their kin? Or was it rather more sensibly that Ulster was merely repeating what he heard tell of the Balmora when, in recent years, chance had become synonymous with lockpicking? As the two continued on, Chance thought of Ulster's mumblings. He had said cheating when they met as if it had just occurred to him, and the cheating armor that he wore had proven useful. Likewise, hot steel. What could war beyond doors mean? Or 2 months and back? What numbered 53? The notion that Ulster possesses secret knowledge about her and the tomb they were in began to unnerve Chance. She made up her mind then to abandon her companion once the treasure had been found. He had cut through the living and undead guardians of the dungeon. If she merely left by the path they had entered, she would be safe without a defender. One phrase he said made perfect sense to her. Drain ring. At one of the manors in Balmora, she had picked up a ring purely because she thought it was pretty. It was not until later that she discovered that it would be used to sap other people's vitality. Could Ulster be aware of this? Would it be taken by surprise if she used it on him? She formulated a plan on how best to desert the Breton as they continued down the hall. Abruptly, the passage ended with a large metal door, secured by a golden lock. Using her pick, Chance snapped away the 2 tumblers and bolt, and swung the door open. The treasure of the errant tomb was within. Chance quietly slipped her glove off her hand, exposing the ring as she stepped into the room. There were 53 bags of gold within. As she turned, the door closed between her and the Breton. On her side, it did not resemble a door anymore, but a wall beyond doors. For many days, Chance screamed and screamed as she tried to find a way out of the room. For some days after that, she listened dully to the laughter of Shegorat within her own head. 2 months later, when Ulster returned, she was dead. He used a rock to prop open the door and remove the gold. The Exodus by Wogan Ya. Vala was a little girl, beautiful and sweet-natured, beautiful and smart, beautiful and energetic. Everything that her parents had dreamed she would be, as perfect as she was. They could not help but have dreams for her. Her father, a bit of a social climber named Mountain, thought she would marry well, perhaps become a princess of the empire. Her mother, an insecure woman named Sineta, thought she would reach greatness on her own as a knight or a sorceress. As much as they wanted the very best for their daughter, they argued about what her fate would be, but both were wrong. Instead of growing up, she grew very ill. The temples told them to give up hope, and the Mages Guild told them that what afflicted Vala was so rare, so deadly, that there was no cure. She was doomed to die, and soon. When the great institutions of the empire failed them, Mountain and Sineta sought out the witches, the sorcerer hermits, and the other hidden secret powers that lurk in the shadows of civilization. "I can think of only one place you can go," said an old herbalist they found in the most remote peaks of the Rogarian Mountains, the Mage Guild of Olenvel. "But we have already been to the Mage Guild," protested Mountain. They couldn't help us." "Go to Olenvel," the herbalist insisted, "and tell no one that you're going there." It was not easy to find Olenvel, as it did not appear on any modern map. In the booksellers in Skyrim, however, they found it in an historic book of cartography from the Second Era. In the yellowed pages, there was Olenvel, a city on an island in the northern coast, a day's sail in summertide from Winterhold. Bundling their pale daughter against the chill of the ocean wind, the couple set sail, using the whole map as their only guide. For nearly 2 days they were at sea, circling the same position, wondering if they were the victim of a cruel trick, and then they saw it. In the midst of crashing waves were twin crumbled statues framing the harbor, long-forgotten gods of heroes. The ships within were half-sunk, rotten shells along the docks. Merton brought his ship in, and the three walked into the deserted island city. Taverns with broken windows, a plaza with a dried-up well, shattered palaces and fire-blackened tenements, barren shops and abandoned stables, all desolated, all still, but for the high keening ocean wind that whistled through the empty places. And gravestones. Every road and alley was lined and crossed again, with memorials to the dead. Merton and Sineta looked at one another. The chill they felt had little to do with the wind. Then they looked at Vala and continued on their goal, the Mages Guild of Olenvel. Candlelight glistened through the windows of the great dark building, but it brought them little relief to know that someone was alive in the island of death. They knocked on the door and steeled themselves against whatever horror they might face within. The door was opened by a rather pamphlet middle-aged old woman with freezing blonde hair. Standing behind her, a meek-looking bald gnome, about her age, a shy teenage Breton couple, still very pimply and awkward, and a very old, apple-cheeked Breton man who grinned with delight at the visitors. "Oh, my goodness," said an old woman, all afflutter. "I thought my ears must be fooling me when I heard that door a-knocking. Come in, it's so cold." The three were ushered in the door, and they were relieved to find that the guild did not look abandoned in the least. It was well swept, well lit, and cheerfully decorated. The group fell into introductions. The inhabitants of the guild house in Hollandven were two families, the Nords, Jamal and Ethel, and the Bretons, Lewell and Rosalind, and all Wister. They were friendly and accommodating, immediately bringing some mulled wine and bread, while Munton and Sinitar explained to them what they were doing there and what the healers and herbalists had said about Vala. So, you see, said Sinitar tearfully, we didn't think we'd find the mage guild or Hollandvale. But now we have. Please, you are our last hope. The five strangers also had tears in their eyes. Ned wept particularly noisily. Oh, you've been through too much, the Nord woman bawled. Of course we'll help. Your little girl will be right as rain. It is fair to tell you, said Jamal more stoically. He clearly was also touched by the tale. This is a guild house, but we are not mages. We took this building because it was abandoned and it serves our purpose since the Exodus. We are necromancers. Necromancers? Said Ned cleverly. How could these nice people be anything so horrible? Yes, dear. Ned smiled, patting her hand. I know we have a bad reputation, I'm afraid. Never was very good, and now that well-meaning but foolish Archmagister Hannibal Craven made the worn king hit his soul, cried the old man, quite suddenly and very viciously. Now, Wister, said the teenage girl Rosalind, blushing and smiling at Sinitar apologetically. I'm sorry about him. He's usually very sweet-natured. Well, of course, he's right. Manny Marco will have the last say in the matter, Jamal said. But right now, it's all very well awkward. When Traven officially banned the heart, we had to go into hiding. The only other option was to abandon it altogether, and that's just foolish, too. There are many who have done it. Not many people know about Hollandvale anymore, since Tiber Septim used it as his own personal graveyard, said Lewell. Took us a week to find it again, but it's perfect for us. Lots of dead bodies, you know. Lewell, Rosalind admonished him. You're going to scare them. Sorry, Lewell grinned sheepishly. I don't care what you do here, said Merton sternly. I just want to know what you can do for my daughter. Well, said Jamal with a shrug. I guess we can make it so she doesn't die and he's never sick again. Sneta gasped. Please, we'll give you everything we have. Nonsense, said Ned, picking up Vala in her big, beefy arms. Oh, what a beautiful girl. Would you like to feel better, little sweetheart? Vala nodded wearily. You stay here, Jamal said. Rosalind, I'm sure we have something better than bread to offer these nice folks. Letter started to carry Vala away, but Sneta ran after her. Wait, I'm coming too. Oh, I'm sure you would, but they will ruin the spell, dear, Ned said. Don't worry about a thing. We've done this dozens of times. Merton put his arm around his wife, and she relented. Rosalind hurried out of the kitchen and brought some roast fowl and more mulled wine for them. They sat in silence and hate. Wister shrugged suddenly. The little girl has died. Oh, Sneta gasped. What in oblivion do you mean? Merton cried. Winston, was that really necessary? Lewell scowled at the old man before turning to Merton and Sneta. She had to die. Necromancy is not about curing a disease. It's about resurrection, total regeneration, transforming the whole body, not just the part that aren't working now. Merton stood up angrily. If those mania killed her? They didn't, Rosalind snapped, her shy eyes now showing fire. Your daughter was on her last breath when she came here. Anyone could see that. I know that this is hard, horrible even, but I won't have you call that sweet couple who are only trying to help you maniacs. Sinetta burst into tears. But she's going to leave now, isn't she? Oh, yes, Lilwell says, smiling broadly. Oh, thank you, thank you. Sinetta burst into tears. I don't know what we would have done. I know how you feel, said Rosalind, patting Winston's hand fondly. When I thought we were going to lose him, I was willing to do anything just like you. Sinetta smiled. How old is your father? My son, Rosalind corrected her. He's 6. From the other room came the sound of Ginny's footsteps. Voilà, go give your parents a big hug, said Jamal. Mountain and Sinetta turned, and the screaming began. Oh, she was a walking dead. Oh boy. Junal, the Rune God. It is impossible to discount the wisdom and power of Junal. We in Skyrim are often seen by the rest of Tamriel as drunken hosts or barbarians with little thought in their minds other than a eagerness for battle. Most forget that their favorite Julianus was first a Nord god, one that valued wisdom, intelligence, and the pursuit of knowledge above all else. We true Nord have not forgotten Junal. There are still those among us that enjoy scholarly pursuits and the broadening of our minds. Perhaps we are but a token few these days. But hope is not lost. North must remember that they are called to a higher purpose than the brandishing of swords. We should be pursuing matters that enrich our lives, not risk them. Things such as scholarship, history, reading, and invention. If you turn up your nose while reading this, take comfort in knowing that you are not alone. There are many Nords who feel the same way. Junal wavers in favor because of foolish notion that the pursuit of knowledge is somehow beneath us, that anything that doesn't make us stronger or display our courage for everyone to see is worthless. But I beseech you to abandon those notions. They have been learned, which means they can be unlearned. We need not do away with our strength as warriors in order to bolster our minds. In fact, doing both in conjunction can only improve both aspects of our beings. To be an excellent warrior, you must also have a strong mind and the knowledge to carry you through battles. Wouldn't you agree? If the importance of learning is not enough to interest you, let that be your motivation instead. Junal is still ours, and Skyrim is still a land of warriors who are enriched by knowledge as well as combat. Do not turn up your nose at such pursuits. If we turn a blind eye to Junal and his teachings, then we are doomed as a people. Know your armor. A guide to surviving in Skyrim. If you can understand the principles that guide the construction of armors, you will come to know a relatively simple system that lets you read armors even in the midst of battle. That is, different armors contingent of their design and material come with different strengths and weaknesses. The warrior who can recognize these differences will be the one who survives. There are far too many armors for one to learn them all individually. Instead, this book will instruct the reader in the general principles of armor such that they can wield knowledge to their advantage even when faced with a novel opponent. To this end, one need only consider two questions. First, of what is the armor made? Second, what is its design? Let us consider this in turn. Armors are made of 4 types of materials: fur, leather, metal, and glasses. All of these bring different properties. Fur armors are the cheapest and least effective. Beyond modest protection, they also protect the wearer against the cold, including frost magic. To this end, many armors made from other materials include a fur underlayer. However, the physical properties of fur are limited, and in particular, they offer almost no resistance to arrows. Example, the fur armor worn by common bandit, also that of the Forsworn. Leather is the next most available material. While it is overall a superior material to fur, it nonetheless remains vulnerable to arrows. The curing process results in a resistance to heat, so blacksmiths often wear leather aprons, but it also means leather armor protects against fire-based magic. Example, hide, leather, stuned, and so on. The light armor of all guards and the Imperial legions. Metal armors are heavy and expensive, but offer a great deal of protection than fur or leather. They are particularly effective against arrows and bladed weapons. However, metal is vulnerable to shock spells, seemingly drawing them toward the wearer and heating to extreme temperatures with prolonged exposure. Example: iron, steel, dwarven, orcish, and heavy legend armors. Glassy armors are rare but come in a variety of forms. They are not made of glass, as it is commonly understood, but rather a tough and somewhat inflexible material that ranges from opalescent to rock-like in appearance. This material is broadly opposed to metal. It is tremendously resistant to shock spells, but lacks malleability, being degraded by blunt strikes or the sudden temperature changes caused by fire and frost magic. Example: elven, glass, and ebony. The material is not the only concern, however, as many materials can be worked into different designs, with aesthetic vary from place to place. Three general design styles can typically be recognized: layered, thick, and deep. The layered design is straightforward and reasonably economical. Multiple thin layers are combined to deflect blows. This helps reduce the penetration of arrows, but does little else to help the armor. Example: scaled, elven, orcish, and imperial light armors. The thick design is similarly straightforward, but sacrifices mobility as it requires lots of material to be borne by the wearer. Nonetheless, this gives the wearer significant physical protection, particularly against blades and arrows. Example: irons and steel armor, but also glass armor. The deep design is exemplified by plate armors produced by master blacksmiths. The goal of this design is to create a buffer zone between the wearer and the incoming attack that prevents harm. It is highly effective against blunt weapons and also axes. However, it poses immense challenges to the maker and must be custom fit to the wearer. Example: steel plate, dwarven, and ebony armors. The true heart of smithing, then, is not in simply choosing the material or design, but rather identifying the combination of both that produces the desired result. To illustrate this principle in action, let us consider some well-known armor styles. Imperial light armor, leather, layered. Note here that the weakness of leather to arrows is rectified by the layered design. This produces a well-rounded armor with notable protection against fire spells. Scaled armor, leather and fur layered. The addition of fur causes a renewed weakness to arrows, but provides additional resistance to the cold, as well a well-balanced armor for rangers and scouts. Iron armor, metal, thick. Both material and design work together to provide a high level of protection against arrows and blades. Although the weakness to shock spells must be kept in mind. Addition of fur, as in banded iron or steel armors, sacrifice some of the arrow's resistance in return for significant protection against the cold. Elven armor, glassy, layered. A risky combination, highly resistant to shock and arrows, but weak to fire, frost, and blunt weapons. Suitable for skilled warriors who can outflank dangerous foes. Dwarven armor, metal, deep, a remarkable achievement, noticeably resistant to all forms of physical attack, offer little against magic, however, and is weak to shock spell. Ebony armor, glassy, deep. An armor worthy of the greatest knights. Ebony combines the magical property of glass with the physical protection of the deep design. with these examples acting to illustrate the principles of material and design in action, we wish the reader well in their travels. So guys, now we know everything about armors, right? And oh, when you have your home outfit, I wish you can wear the steel armor I gave you. It's pretty. Immortal Blood by Anonymous. The moons and stars were hidden from sight, making that particular quiet night especially dark. The town guard had to carry torches to make their rounds, but the man who came to call at my chapel carried no light with him. I came to learn that Movar Pekin could see in the dark almost as well as the light, an excellent talent considering his interests were exclusively nocturnal. One of my acolytes brought him to me, and from the look of him, I had first thought he was in need of healing. He was pale to the point of opalescence, with a face that looked like he had once been very handsome before some unspeakable suffering. The dark circles under his eyes bespoke exhaustion, but the eyes themselves were alert, intense, almost insane. He quickly dismisses my notion that he himself was here, thought he did want to discuss a specific disease. Vampirism, he said, and then paused at my quizzical look. I was told that you were someone I should seek out for help understanding it. Who told you that? I asked, with a smile. Tessina Gray. I immediately remembered her, a brave, beautiful knight who had needed my assistance separating fact from fiction on the subject of the vampire. It had been 2 years, and I had never heard whenever my advice had proven effective. You've spoken to her? How is her ladyship? I asked. Dead, Movar replied coldly, and then, responding to my shock, he added to perhaps soften the blow. She said your advice was invaluable, at least for the one vampire. When last I talked to her, she was tracking another. It killed her. Then the advice I gave her was not enough, I sighed. Why do you think it would be enough for you? I was a teacher once myself, years ago, he said. Not in a university, a trainer in the Fighters Guild. But I know that if a student doesn't ask the right questions, the teacher cannot be responsible for his failure. I intend to ask you the right questions. And that he did. For hours, he asked questions, and I answered what I could, but he never volunteered any information about himself. He never smiled. He only studied me with those intense eyes of his, committing every word I said to memory. Finally, I turned the questioning around. You said you were a trainer at the Fighters Guild. Are you on an assignment for them? No, he said curtly. And finally, I could detect some weariness in those feverish eyes of his. I would like to continue this tomorrow night, if I could. I need to get some sleep and absorb this. You sleep during the day? I smiled. To my surprise, he returned the smile. Too, it was more of a grimace. When tracking your prey, you adapt their habits. The next day, he did return with more questions. These ones were specific. He wanted to know about the vampires of Eastern Skyrim. I told him about the most powerful tribe, the Volkiar, paranoid and cruel, whose very breath could freeze their victims' blood in their veins. I explained to him how they lived beneath the ice of remote and haunted lakes, never venturing into the world of men except to feed. Movar Pekin listened carefully and asked more questions into the night until, at last, he was ready to leave. I will not see you for a few days, he said, but I will return and tell you how helpful your information has been. True to his word, the man returned to my chapel shortly after midnight, 4 days later. There was a fresh scar on his cheek, but he was smiling, that grim but satisfied smile of his. Your advice helped me very much, he said. But you should know that the Volkiar have an additional ability you didn't mention. They can reach through the ice of their legs without breaking it. It was quite a nasty surprise, being grabbed from below without any warning. How remarkable, I said with a laugh. And terrifying. You're lucky you survived. I don't believe in luck. I believe in knowledge and training. Your information helped me, and my skill at melee combat sealed the bloodsucker's fate. I've never believed in weaponry of any kind. Too many unknowns. Even the best swordsmith has created a flawed blade. But you know what your body is capable of. I know I can land 1,000 blows without losing my balance, providing I get the first strike. The first strike? Remember? So you must never be surprised. That is why I came to you, said Movar. You know more than anyone alive about these monsters, and all their cursed varieties across the land. Now you must tell me about the vampires of North Valenwood. I did as he asked, and once again his question taxed my knowledge. There were many tribes to cover. The Bonsamu were indistinguishable from Bosmer except when seen by candlelight. The Kirates, who could disintegrate into mist. The Yeked, who swallowed men whole. The dread Telborth, who preyed on children, eventually taking their place in the family, waiting patiently for years before murdering them all in their unnatural hunger. Once again, he bade me farewell, promising to return in a few weeks, and once again he returned. as he said, just after midnight. This time Mova had no fresh scars, but he, again, had new information. You were wrong about the curious being unable to vaporize when pushed underwater, he said, patting my shoulder fondly. Fortunately, they cannot travel far in their mist form, and I was able to track it down. It must have surprised it fearfully. Your field knowledge is becoming impressive, I said. I should have had an acolyte like you decades ago. Now tell me, he said, of the vampires of Cyrodiil. I told him what I could. There was but one tribe in Cyrodiil, a powerful clan who had ousted all other competitors, much like the Imperials themselves had done. Their true name was unknown, lost in history, but they were experts at concealment. If they kept themselves well fed, they were indistinguishable from living persons. They were cultured, more civilized than the vampire of the provinces, preferring to feed on victims while they were asleep, unaware. They will be difficult to surprise, Movar forward, but I will seek one out and tell you what I learned. And then you will tell me of the vampires of High Rock and Hammerfell and elsewhere, and Black March and Morrowind and the Somerset Island, yes? I nodded, knowing then that this was a man on an eternal quest. He wouldn't be satisfied with but the barest hint of how things were. He needed to know it all. He did not return for a month, and on the night that he did, I could see his frustration and despair, though there were no light burning in my chapel. I failed, he said, as I lit a candle. You were right, I could not find a single one. I brought the light up to my face and smiled. He was surprised, even stunned by the pallor of my flesh, the dark hunger in my edgeless eyes, and the teeth. Oh yes, I think the teeth definitely surprised the man who could not afford to be surprised. I haven't fed in 72 hours, I explained, as I fell on him. He did not land the first blow, or the last. The First Old Revolt by Mavius Seas. You told me that if her brother won, she would be sister to the king of Wereth, and Raymond will want to keep her for the Alliance. But her brother, Elset, lost and has fled with his mother back to Morrowind, and still Raymond has not left her to marry me. Lady Gerlin took a long, slow drag of the hookah and blew out dragon's breath, so the scent of blossoms perfumed her gilded chamber. You make a very poor advisor, Kyle. I might have spent my time romancing the king of Cloudrest or Alinor instead of the wretched royal husband of Queen Morgia. Kyle knew better than to hurt his lady's vanity by the mere suggestion that the king of First Hall might have come to love his Dunmer queen. Instead, he gave her a few minutes to pause and look for a balcony out over the high cliff palaces of the ancient capital. The moons shone like crystal on the deep sapphire waters of the Abyssinian Sea. It was ever springtide here, and he could well understand why she would prefer a throne in this land than in Clodrest or Alinor. Finally, he spoke. "The people are with you, my lady. They do not relish the idea of Raymond's dark-haired heirs ruling the kingdom when he is gone. I wonder," she said calmly, "I wonder if, as the king would not give up his queen for want of alliance, whether she would give herself up out of fear. Of all the people of First Hall, who most disliked the Dunmer influence on the court?" "Is this a trick question, my lady?" asked Care. "The Tribbit monks, of course. Their credo has ever been for pure Altmer bloodlines on Somerset, and among the royal families most of all. But, my lady, they make very weak allies." "I know," said Ghialin, taking up her hookah again, thoughtfully, a smile creeping across her face. "Morgia has seen to it that they have no power. She would have exterminated them altogether had Raymond not stopped her for all the good they do for the country's folk. What if they found themselves with a very powerful benefactress, one with intimate knowledge of the court of First Hall, the chief concubine of the king, and all the gold to buy weapons with that her father, the king of Skywatch, could supply? Well armed and with the support of the country people, they would be formidable," nodded Kyle. "But as your adviser, I must warn you, if you make yourself an active foe of Queen Morgia, you must play to win. She has inherited much of her mother's, Queen Parenzia's, intelligence and spirit of vengeance. She will not know I am her foe until it is too late." Shrugged Gallion. "Go to the Tribbit monastery and bring me 3 Arlelim. We must strategize our plan of attack." For 2 weeks, Raymond was advised about growing resentment in the countryside from peasants who called Morgia the Black Queen, but it was nothing that he had not heard before. His attention was on the pirates on a small island of the coast called Callius Lair. They have been more brazen as late, attacking royal barges in organized raids. To deliver a crushing blow, he ordered the greatest part of his militia to invade the island, an incursion he himself would lead. A few days after Raymond left the capital, the revolt of the Tribbit monks exploded. The attacks were well coordinated and without warning. The chief of the guards did not wait to be announced, bursting into Morgia's bedchamber ahead of a flurry of maidservants. "My queen," he said, "it is a revolution." By contrast, Gallienne was not asleep when Kyle came to deliver the news. She was seated by the window, smoking her hookah and looking at the fires. "Far off in the hills, Morgia is with council," he explained. "I am certain they are telling her that the Tribbit monks are behind the uprising and that the revolution will be at the city gates by morning." "How large is the revolutionary army in contrast to the remaining royal militia?" asked Gallienne. "The odds are well in our favor," said Kyle. "Too, not perhaps as much as we hoped. The country folks, it seems, like to complain about their queen, but stop short of insurrection. Primarily, the army is composed of the monks themselves and a horde of mercenaries your father's gold bought." In a way of thinking, it is preferable this way. They are more professional and organized than a common mob. Really, they are a true army, complete with a horn section. If that doesn't frighten the Black Queen into abdication, nothing will, smiled Gallienne, rising from a chair. The poor dear must be beside herself with worry. I must fly to her side and enjoy it. Gallienne was disappointed when she saw Morgia come out of the council chamber, considering that she had been woken from a deep sleep with cries of revolution and had spent the last several hours in consultation with her meager general force. She looked beautiful. There was a sparkle of proud defiance in her bright red eyes. "My queen," Gallienne cried, forcing real tears, "I came as soon as I heard. Will we all be slaughtered?" "A distinct possibility," replied Morgia simply. Gallienne tried to read her, but the expressions of women, especially alien women, were a far greater challenge than those of Almer men. "I hate myself for even thinking to propose this," said Gallienne, "but since the cause of their fury is you, perhaps, if you were to give up the throne, they might disperse. Please understand, my queen, I am thinking only of the good of the kingdom and our own lives. I understand the spirit of your suggestion," smiled Morgia, "and I will take it under advisement. Believe me, I've thought of it myself, but I don't think it will come to that." "Have you a plan for defending us?" asked Gallienne, contorting her features to an expression she knew bespoke girlish hope. "The king left us several dozens of his royal battle mages," said Morgia. "I think the mob believes we have nothing but palace guards and a few soldiers to protect us. When they get to the gates, are greeted with a wave of fireballs, I find it highly likely that they will lose heart and retreat." "But isn't there some protection they could be using against such an assault?" asked Gallienne in a best worried voice. "If they knew about it, naturally there is. But an unruly mob is unlikely to have mages killed in the heart of restoration, but which they could shield themselves from the spell, or mysticism by which they could reflect the spell back on my battle mages. That would be the worst scenario, but even if they were well organized enough to have mystic in their ranks, and enough of them to reflect so many spells, it just isn't done. No battlefield commander would advise such a defense during a siege unless he knew precisely what he was going to be meeting. And then, of course, once of the trap is spurred." Morgia winked. "It's too late for a countering spell." "A most cunning solution, Your Highness," said Gallienne, honestly impressed. Morgia excused herself to meet with her battle mages, and Gallienne gave her an embrace. Kyle was waiting in the palace garden for his lady. "Are there mystic among the mercenaries?" she asked quickly. "Several, in fact," replied Kyle, bewildered by her query. "Largely rejects from the Psychic Order, but they know enough to cast the regular spells of the school. You must sneak out the city gate and tell Friar Lilim to have their cast reflection spells on hold the front line before they attack," said Gallienne. "That's most irregular battlefield strategy," frowned Gael. "I know it is, fool. That's what Morgia is counting out. There is a gang of battle mages who are going to be waiting on the battlement to greet our army with a barrage of fireballs." "Battle mages? I would have thought that King Raymond would have brought them with him to fight the pirates." "You would have thought that," laughed Gallienne, "but then we would be defeated. Now, go!" Friar Lilim agreed with Kyle that it was a bizarre, unheard of way to begin a battle. casting reflection spells on all one's troop. It went against every tradition. And as a tribute monk, he valued tradition above every other virtue. There was little other choice, too, given the intelligence. He had few enough healers in the army, as it were, and their energies could not be wasted casting resistance spells. At dawn's light, the rebel army was in sight of the gleaming spires of First Hold. Friar Lelim gathered together every soldier who knew even the rudimentary secrets of mysticism, who knew how to tap into the elementary conundrum and notes of the energy of Magica. Too few were masters of the art. Their combined force was powerful to behold. A great surge of entangling power washed over the army, crackling, hissing, and infusing all with their ghostly force. When they arrived at the gates, every soldier, even the least imaginative, knew that no spell would touch him for a long time. Friar Lelim watched his army batter into the gate with the great satisfaction of a commander who has counteracted an unthinkable attack with an outrageous defense. The smile quickly faded from his face. They were met at the battlement not by mages, but by common archers of the palace guard, as the flaming arrows fell upon the sieges like a red rain. The healers ran in to help the wounded. Their healing spells reflected off the dying men, one after the other. Chaos ruled as the attackers suddenly found themselves defenseless and began a panicked, unorganized retreat. Friar Lelim himself considered briefly holding his ground before fleeing himself. Later, he would send furious notes to Lady Gallienne and Kyle, but they were returned. Even his best secret agents within the palace were unable to find their whereabouts. Never had, as it turns out, much previous experience with torture, and they soon confessed their treachery to King's satisfaction. Kyle was executed, and Gallienne was sent back with escort to her father's court of Skywatch. He has still to find a husband for her. Raymond, by contrast, has elected not to take a new royal concubine. The common folk of First Hall considered this break in palace protocol to be more of the sinister alien influence of the Black Queen, and grumble to all who will listen. The First Hold Revolt. Aedra and Daedra. The designations of gods, demons, Aedra and Daedra are universally confusing to the layman. They are often used interchangeably. Aedra and Daedra are not relative terms, they are elvish and exact. Asura is a Daedra both in Skyrim and Morrowind. Aedra is usually translated as ancestor, which is as close as Cyrodiilic can come to this elven concept. Daedra means roughly not our ancestors. This distinction was crucial to the Dunmer, whose fundamental split in ideology is represented in their mystical genealogy. Aedra are associated with stasis. Daedra represent change. Aedra created the mortal world and are born to the earthborns. Daedra, who cannot create, have the power to change. As part of the divine contract of creation, the Aedra can be killed. Witness Lorcan and the moons. The Protean Daedra, whom rules do not apply, can only be banished. The Aedra can be killed. Witness Lorcan and the moons. Okay, so you can't kill a Daedra. You can kill an Aedra, but not a Daedra. Crow and Raven. Crow and Raven were watching Cormorant dive for fish. I wish I could dive, said Crow. I like to eat fish. What? Said Raven. Are you saying Cormorant can do something that you cannot? That's absurd. You're twice the bird Cormorant is. You're right, said Crow, and he dove deep into the water. Half a minute later, he trashed his way back to the surface. Raven stood nearby. Raven, gasped Crow, why did you say that? I nearly drowned. Raven shrugged and said, I like to eat birds. Crow and Raven were watching Morning Dove take a bath in a shallow pool. I believe I shall take a bath as well, said Crow. He flew down, splashed about the pool, and then flew back up next to Raven. That's better, said Crow. Why is that, said Raven. Your feathers, and your beak, and your eyes are just as black as before. True, said Crow, but when I flew down to the pool, it startled Morning Dove, and she flew to her nest. Now I know where it is. Eggs for lunch, said Raven. Crow and Raven sat in the tree above the roadside inn, above a drover snoring in a drunken stupor. Crow cocked his head and said, That sleeping person has a shiny pin on his shirt. It's an award, said Raven. He got it for drinking hair. If you drink the rest of the hair in his mug, you'll get a shiny pin too. Shiny pin, said Crow. He flew down to the table, drank the rest of the hair, and then fell down and couldn't get up. Raven flew down and plucked the pin from the drover's shirt. Shiny pin, she said, and flew off. Shiraz and the Divine by Faustulus Junius, Sub-Curator of Ancient Theology and Paleonumerology, Imperial Library. The position Shiraz enjoys in Cyrodiil worship is often misconstrued. He and 1,000 other deities have sizable cults in the imperial city. Shiraz is especially venerated in the Colovian West, to his co-shore there, as the West Kings are resolutely and religiously Nordic. The haziness of Shiraz's relationship to the divines, he is often called their missing sibling, begins with Saint Alesia, the so-called slave queen of Cyrodiil, the founder figure of the original Cyrodiil Empire. In the earlier Syro-Nordic stories of the Heartland, Shiraz fought against the Halides, the Heartland's high elves, on mankind's behalf. Then, for some unknown reason, he vanishes from the stage, presumably to help other humans elsewhere. And without his leadership, the Halides conquer the humans and enslave them. This slavery lasts for generations. The isolated humans eventually begin to venerate the pantheons of their masters, or at least assimilate so much of high elf religious practices into their native traditions that the two become indistinguishable. In the first area, 242, under the leadership of Alesia, her demigod lover, Morihaus Brave of Cain, and the infamous Pelinile Walistrek, the Cyrodiilic humans revolt. When Skyrim lends its army to the slave queen of the south, the revolution succeeds. The Halide hegemonies are quickly overthrown. Shortly thereafter, White Gold Tower is captured by Alicia's forces, and she promptly declares herself the first empress of Cyrodiil. Part of the package meant that she had to become the high priestess of Akatosh as well. Akatosh was an Aldemiri god, and Alicia's subjects were as yet unwilling to renounce their worship of the elven pantheon. She found herself in a very sensitive political situation. She needed to keep the North as her allies, but they were at the time fiercely opposed to any adoration of elven deities. On the other hand, she could not force her subjects to revert back to the Nordic pantheon for fear of another revolution. Therefore, concessions were made, and Empress Alesia instituted a new religion, the Hate Divines, an elegant, well-researched synthesis of both pantheons, Nordic and Aldemiri. Shiraz, as a result, had to change. He could no longer be bloodthirsty anti-Almer warlord of old. He could not disappear altogether, or the North will have withdrawn their support of her rule. In the end, he had become the spirit behind all humans' undertaking. Even though this was merely a thinly disguised, watered-down version of Shore, it was good enough for the North. As for why Tiber Septim has not attempted to revitalize Shiraz during his wars against the Aldemiri dominion, we can only speculate that at this time, memories of the Alessian Order's follies, the Dragon Break, the War of Righteousness, the defeat at Glunumbra's Moor, would only damage his campaign for the imperial crown. Some more laws, guys.